Today in class we'll be talking about Chapter 9, Spatial Inequality in Mexico City. While we are going over this video, make sure that you have your book and your worksheet out. If at any time you need to pause or stop this video, please do so. You may rewind it as many times as you need. Please open your book now to Chapter 9, Spatial Inequality in Mexico City. You can find the page number for Chapter 9 in your table of contents of your book. By the end of class, you will be able to identify the causes and consequences of spatial inequality in Mexico City. You will also be able to analyze data and maps to draw conclusions about the neighborhoods of Mexico City's federal districts. Don't worry if you don't know what a federal district is at this point. We will be talking about them as we go through this video and the lesson. Right now, you should be opened up to Chapter 9 and looking at Section 1. Now, notice our essential question. Why does spatial inequality exist in urban areas? And that's what we're trying to figure out as we move through this lesson. Read along with me in your book as I read out loud. Ana Romero lives in a poor part of Mexico City. She and her family share a simple two-room house. The house is made of concrete bricks and scraps of wood and cardboard taken from the dump. There is no glass in the windows, and there is no running water. 6 days a week, Anna travels by bus to her job on the other side of the city. She works as a maid in the Alba household. The Albas live in a beautiful 15-room house with a large garden and a swimming pool. To Anna, it seems like a castle. Anna earns $6 for working a 12-hour day. At 7 p.m., as the Albas sit down for a big meal of chicken, meat, or fish, Anna heads home to cook rice and beans for her family. The Albas and the Romeros live just 15 miles apart, but they live in very different worlds. The contrast in their lives is an example of spatial inequality. This is an unequal distribution of wealth or resources over a geographic area. It means that some places within that area are richer or poorer than others. Mexico City offers many examples of spatial inequality. In this chapter, you will learn about the growth of Mexico City as an urban area. You will read about the causes and the effects of city's rapid growth. You will also learn about the spatial inequality that has resulted from the city's expansion. Now, down here at the bottom, in this area right here, you will see that this is an example of the delegaciones of Mexico City, or of the federal districts. Notice that some districts are bigger than others, they have crooked, jagged shapes, and that they're represented in different colors. These different delegaciones are part of Mexico City, and they are an example of spatial inequality. Now, we will be talking about 3 separate ones as we go through this lesson, and you will try to figure out which one is based on which as a result of the information that we have. Please turn to Section 2, the geographic setting. Mexico City is one of the world's largest cities in population. It sits on a highland basin about 7,000 feet above sea level. The basin is called the Valley of Mexico. The valley is surrounded by mountains. It has a mild climate and rich soil. The Valley of Mexico has been an important place of settlement since ancient times. A city of wonders. The Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, the first settlers in the Mexico Valley, arrived thousands of years ago. At the time, several large, shallow lakes covered the valley floor. Small cities later grew up around these lakes. In 1325, a group known as the Aztecs settled on an island of Lake Texcoco, where they founded a city called Tenochtitlan. The Aztecs were great warriors. They soon built a mighty empire. Their city grew too. By the time the Spanish arrived in 1519, Tenochtitlan was one of the greatest cities in the world. Around 200,000 people lived in the Aztec capital. Up to 1 million lived in the Valley of Mexico. Tenochtitlan is a marvelous place. One Spaniard said it was like the enchanted vision from a fairy tale. Great pyramids and temples towered above the city. Fine palaces and homes lined the streets and plazas. Many canals crossed the island. 3 causeways, or raised roads, connected it to the shore. A huge market sold exotic goods from around the empire. The people of Tenochtitlan enjoyed a high standard of living. This term refers to people's overall level of comfort and well-being. A city resident had plenty of food from farming, fishing, and trade. An aqueduct brought in fresh water from the surrounding hills. The houses were well built. People lived in clean, orderly neighborhoods. A bustling national capital, Mexico City. In 1521, the Spanish conquered the Aztec Empire. The Spanish destroyed the Aztec capital. They built the new city in its place. Over time, Mexico City became one of the most beautiful cities in the Americas. In 1821, Mexico won its independence from Spain. Mexico City became the capital of the new country. It continued to grow slowly. By the 1950s, the city was a blend of modern and historic buildings. Broad avenues and tree-filled parks made it a pleasant place to live. Today, Mexico City remains the center of Mexican life, but it is no longer the graceful city of old. In the past 50 years, urbanization or city growth has increased at a rapid rate. In 1970, the city had over 8 million people. 10 years later, it had almost doubled in population. There are now at least 19 million people in Mexico City's metropolitan area. This area includes the city and its suburbs. A key factor in Mexico City's growth in migration from rural migration from rural parts of the country. Many people have moved to the capital city because of rural decline or increasing poverty in the countryside. Life in rural areas is hard, but for many people, the city has become a difficult place to live too, as you will see. At this point, you need to have out your geoterms. You should write down the geoterms. They are in your book in section 2, and you can see they are on this page as well. This is what your geoterms sheet looks like. Please make sure that you fill out the definition in this column, your sentences in this column, and then a symbol, a picture that helps you remember what these are. Let's quickly talk about each one of these geoterms. Rural decline. This is the worsening economic conditions in the countryside, including rising unemployment and growing poverty. Rural decline drives migration to cities. If we think about many parts of Latin America, especially south of Mexico, many people are actually leaving these areas to head for Mexico City, the largest city in north of the hemisphere. So when people have nowhere else to go, they travel to the cities in hopes for jobs and employment. Many times when they get there, they realize that those dreams are not a reality. Next one, spatial inequality. The unequal distribution of wealth or resources in a geographic area, so that some places are richer than others. We see this in cities all the time. Many places are wealthy, while others are very poor, and these often lie within just a few miles, if not a few blocks, with one another. And so what we'll be looking at throughout this chapter is, where does this exist? How does it affect the population and the culture of people? One of the things I want you to remember as we go through and look at this, we're not trying to determine whether this is right or wrong. We're just looking at it and trying to determine how it makes us think about that area. Standard of living is something that we have to think about overall as we look at this. This is the overall level of comfort, well-being of a group or a country. People in developed countries generally have a higher standard of living than people in developing countries. Last one is urbanization. This is the movement of people from rural or country farming, things like that, to urban areas, cities, resulting in the growth of urban areas. Remember, Mexico City is a large city, over 8 million people, as you saw in your mapping lab. So this is a large area where people are now moving to. If we look down in here, we see that Mexico City is in the central portion of Mexico. Here's our Gulf of Mexico, here's the Pacific Ocean, and this is really where South America is going to start, is below this. We see Belize is right here, Guatemala, and so when we talk about these people traveling to Mexico City, oftentimes people in Guatemala, Belize, and these other countries will travel north up through this area in search for jobs in Mexico City. Now you see this area right here, these are the delegaciones, or the districts of Mexico City that we'll be talking about. Notice that they are numbered. We are going to be paying attention, a lot of attention to these numbers later on as we start to look for the cities and the delegaciones of where the pictures and the city structure or the city studies are taking place at. Alright, at this point you should be looking at your reading notes and neighborhood visit number 1. Notice that you have a few questions that we need to answer for our readings. The first question, as you go through and read, what challenges do farmers face in Mexico's countryside? Why do many farmers decide to migrate to the city? Then we're going to listen to an interview. You're not actually going to listen to an interview. I'm going to give you the statistics that you need, and then you're going to have to, down in this area, start to decide what neighborhood do you believe that it is, and then why do you think that it was that neighborhood. Again, notice that all of these numbers are over here. I'm going to show you how to use that shortly. Let's answer these questions, though. What challenges do farmers face, and why do many farmers decide to migrate to the city? We see that it says here, Juan Ortiz and his family lives in a small village in central Mexico. Like his father and grandfather before him, Juan is a farmer. He grows corn, beans, and other vegetables on a few acres of land, but conditions have declined in the countryside. Juan can no longer support his family by farming. He has to find other work. Like many farmers, Juan plans to leave the village and move to the city. He is part of the large urban migration caused by rural decline in Mexico City. I want you to pay attention to this map over here to your right. And here you see Mexico's urban population. And here you see urban is in red and rural is in green. Now, starting down here at the bottom, we see in 1950 that Mexico was mostly a rural state, somewhere in the tunes of about 56%. And yet, when we get to 2030, now these are projections, by 2030 it is believed that Mexico is going to be 80% urban and only 20% rural. This is a huge adjustment, a huge shift in population and culture. And so that's what we see. The number of people, this graph shows us that the number of people moving to the city is increasing, and it is in fact having an effect on the city. Farmers struggle in the countryside. Back to the reading. Life for most Mexican farmers is tough. Only about 15% of the land in Mexico is suitable for farming. The rest is too dry, rocky, or mountainous. Most of the best land is held by a small number of wealthy owners. There are several types of farms in Mexico. Some are small private farms. Others are larger farms, held in common by groups of farmers. These communal lands are called ejidos. A third type of farm is a large commercial farm that grows food for export. At one time, small farmers were the backbone of Mexican society. Now they are finding it hard to survive. To compete with large farms, they have decided to increase their production. But they don't have the money to buy seed, fertilizer, or farm machinery. Many of them end up selling their land. Sometimes they go to work for wages on large farms, but such jobs are few and wages are low. As a result, poverty and unemployment have increased in Mexico City. So if we remember what we were trying to answer before, we were trying to figure out why do so many people want to leave and head for the city. Only about 15% of the land in Mexico is suitable for farming. The rest is too dry, rocky, or mountainous, and most of the best land is held by small, wealthy landowners. Make sure you write that down on your sheet. We also needed to answer another question. Why do many farmers decide to migrate to the city? Migration to the city brings renewed hope. Faced with rural decline, let's underline that, many farmers choose to migrate to the city. They hope to find jobs that will pay them a decent wage and give their families a higher standard of living. Remember, that was a geoterm that we talked about, in which we measure how people live, how well they live, what do they have with them. They also hope their children will have an opportunity to get a good education in schools. So here we see two things that we need to write down. All right, jobs that will pay a decent wage and opportunity to get a good education. For years, most rural migrants headed to Mexico City. During the 70s and 80s, about 1,000 people a day moved to the capital. That rate has declined as life in Mexico City has become more difficult. Many migrants now choose to move to other cities in Mexico. Others try to cross the border into the United States. Now that we have our background information, we have to go to the next slide. And this is where we're going to start looking at our neighborhood. And this is our first neighborhood. Now I want to point out a few things to you. Number one, notice that we have an airport in the background. 2, notice this is the community that we're looking at right here. Think about the types of things that the people are using to build. Think about the population density. Think about the green space per person. When we talk about green space, we're talking about lawn or backyard, like you guys have in at your own house or neighborhood. Think about the percentage of homes that were built with good materials. When we say good materials, would you consider this tent structure good material? Or made out of maybe bricks like this over here, good material? Think about the percentage of people over 15 with education beyond primary school. The percentage of homes with water. Do we think that many of these homes in this area would have water? And the number of police officers. As I said, you'll notice that this is near the airport. And it's funny because many of the people that are moving into this area also live by this airport because they see this as a source of economic opportunity. And it just so happens that this airport is near the edge of the city where most migrants end up living. We do see stuff going on and we do see things being built. For example, this wall here and the bricks here. All right, which tells us that there are jobs and opportunity for people to go to. This is a person that we will be talking, that we would have talked to. And we can see some things about their house. One, the types of materials that is being used. We see that they have used tarps. Here is some cardboard in this area. We do see concrete here, and we do see some lumber in this area. Overall, though, we would say that this is not made of good materials, and we'll give you some percentages later on. Now, the other thing I would point out to you is this bucket right here. This bucket would suggest that they do not have running water in this area, and that that person would need to go get water on a regular basis. Think about schooling, and think about population density as we move through as well. Alright, so let's give you some numbers here. Neighborhood 1. The green space per person is 18 square feet. Make sure to write that down in green space per person in neighborhood visit number 1. The percentage of people over the age of 15 with education beyond primary school, and primary school, think about it as grade school, ages 1 through 8, is 57%. And the percentage of homes with water is about 55%. Alright, got that information? Let's move on. This is where we're going to start looking at our delegaciones. Now, we said that our green space per person was 18 square feet. So what we need to do is we need to first look up here at this graph. And this tells us the square feet per person. Ours was 18. So what we're going to do is we're going to go with this gray area right here because it says this is under 30 square feet per person. Now, the next thing that we have to do is identify the districts that fit in this area. And we see that it is number 15, number 6, and number 7 because all three of these correspond with this color right here. Ooh, I forgot number 8 as well. Number 8 as well. Write these down on your sheet. At the bottom of your sheet, you're going to make a T-chart that looks something like this. And on the left-hand side, you're going to write 0, 1, 5, 0, 0, 6, 0, 0, 7, and 0, 0, 8. This is going to help you later on. The next one we're looking at is the population over age 15 in the federal district with education beyond primary school. Now our percentage was 57%. So again, if we look into these areas right here, we have to decide which grouping do we fit into. We see that we have under 55%, 55 to 65%, 65 to 75, and over 75%. We would fit into this category right here, the 55 to 65%. And so again, in our chart that we have over here like this, and we're going to add one to it right here, in the middle category, we're going to put it at 15. The other one was screen space. Alright, so in our middle category, we're going to say 005, 17, 6, 7, 11, 13, 10, 8, and 4. So we're going to write all of these numbers down in that area. On to our last and final group. Homes with water, we said was 55%. So looking based on what we see here, we see that we would fall into this category right here. We have our diagram that's set up like this. We're looking at this black dotted area. So we have 10, 4, 8, 12, 13, and 7. Now what we need to do is cross-reference each one of these categories. So we're going to be looking at this category right here, this category here, and this category here. And what we're going to try and do is figure out, is there a common set of numbers in between all three categories? So I want you to do that right now and see, are there numbers that fit into this category, and this category? And then what are the names of them? Pause and do that right now. When you're ready, press play again, and we'll go over the answer. Alright, so based on what we've seen there, based on these categories right here, we see that you should have come up with the names of Iztapalapa and Magdalena Contreras. Those are the federal districts in which all three of these categories fit. If you have not come up with that answer, double check your work and see what you did wrong that would have made that right. Now we will start with neighborhood visit number 2. Now, the questions that you have to answer before going on are right up in here. And it says, in what ways is Mexico City still growing? What problems is Mexico City experiencing as a result of the rapid growth? Also, notice this is where we're going to be writing our information. And I want you to make a graph down here, just like we did in the other one, where that's going to look like this. And this is where we're going to put our 3 sets of data that we're going to use. Finally, and the last thing, this is where you should be writing where you think that neighborhood is at. Notice that you have all these numbers over here, and you also have a packet that gives you all the different, the federal districts and all the different things of these on your desk as well. Alright, I'm not going to read this one to you guys. You guys need to read this on your book on your own and answer those questions. You see that there are some major things that are going on here with the pollution, the volcanoes, the smog, and air quality. You can see Mexico City over here has grown tremendously. Look at the federal districts here and how small they were and how they've grown over time and spread out. Now, usually this the poorer people that we see in this, especially like we saw in the last section, those people are going to be living off here on the edge. But now we're going to be looking at some of the people that live further into the city, into that area that we more commonly refer to as downtown. And we see this is our neighborhood 2 visit. Now, notice the contrast between the last one that we saw. Notice what sort of materials are being made. Notice what's going on in the picture. Notice that there's windows. Do you think that there's running water? Do you think that the education is going to change? Do you think the number of police officers in this area is going to change? And how that's going to affect how people live and the culture of where the people of which live in that area. This is a gentleman that we'll be talking to, and you see he is working with shoes. He is a shoe leather repairman, and he does a lot of work in the community. Now, this is not something that we use often today around us, but this is something that would be common and popular in other countries. He'll fix the leather shoes, he'll fix the soles of your shoes, the laces, all of that so you can use your shoes over and over again. If we were to interview a little bit about his neighborhood, he would tell us that his neighborhood has a population density of about 34,000 people per square mile. The percentage of people over the age of 15 with education beyond primary school is about 66%, and the number of police officers is 800. So you should write this information down right now in your packet, so as you're going through your communities or your districts, it'll be easier to find that information. Now, our first one is the population density. He told us that our population density was 34,000 people per square mile. And so that would put us in between this grouping right here. And so in our chart that looks like this, we're going to go through and we're going to identify those black dotted ones, which is 0, 0, 2, 14, and 3. In our population that attends school over the age of 15 or beyond primary school, we see that it's 66%, which would again put us in that black and white dotted area. So 2, 16, and 15. 3, and 12. So everyone can see these areas right here. And finally, the last one, the number of police officers is 800. And so that would put us in this gray striped area. So if we're looking at our chart, it's going to be all the way over here. It's number 2, number 6, number 10, 3, 8, and 12. At this point, what you guys need to do is, again, go through each one of these categories and see where you have matches. If something ends up in all 3 categories, circle it. If it doesn't add into all 3 categories, then you can get rid of it. All right? Now, the number that you come up with, you're going to cross-reference with your chart and see what the name of that federal district is, and that's what you're going to write down on your sheet. Based on what we saw there, we should have come up with 2 answers. We should have come up with this one right here and Coyoacán over here. Those are the 2 federal districts that match this, between the 34,000 people per square mile. The 66% of the people with education beyond primary school, and 800 police officers. So the picture that we saw should have come from these 2 neighborhoods.